Hello everyone, it's Migs here again, and I want to welcome you to a new video. This video is all about the console commands in Euro Truck Simulator. There are hundreds of these console commands that can be used, but many are focused on game development rather than the driver interaction. This guide is a shorthand version of the commands that you as a player can use, and this is just to enhance and maximize your gameplay experience. So without wasting any more time, let's get to it. Okay, so if you've been following my videos, you'll know how to access the console or the developer console in EuroTruck. But a quick recap will be, and I've designed this this guide with all the commands that are pertinent to the gameplay, and you can download it from the link below. And just to recap how to do that, how to open the developer console in-game. The console can be opened by pressing the tilde key on the keyboard below the escape key. But that needs to be enabled in the default location of Euro Truck Simulator. So that would be in your documents folder where your Euro Truck Simulator folder is. So that would be under user, I don't know, in your case it will be most probably in the C drive. If you have it in a different location, just look that up, but that's where you'll find the config file. So in this folder, you search for the config file and open it with the text editor. I like to use notepad++. It's a good editor. You can use this normal notepad. So once you've opened the config, look for G developer and G console. Those are the two you need to look. You'll find that the default values is 0. You got to change both of these to 1. Okay, so once you're in game, the commands we're going to look at today are the following. GACC. Okay, so that's adaptive cruise control. The values there go from 1 to 10, and this is incremental values. So it will increase or decrease the distance between your vehicle and the vehicle in front of you when using cruise control. So by adjusting this value, you can go and actually, if I remember correctly, this value can actually go higher than 10, but it's given in the forums as 10. I've tried it with 30. I've tried it with 50. So it just increases the space between you and the vehicle that you're following. Okay, so the minute they start slowing down, that distance will determine the reaction of the truck. So if you're in cruise control and the truck, or you pick up that the guy in front of you is slowing down, the truck will automatically start slowing down, or it will lift off the accelerator. It won't brake. You got to keep that in mind, because this command here works together with this command here, G emergency brake, right? But we'll get into that a little bit later. The next one is G bloom. This is basically an increase and or decrease in the bloom effect. The next one is G cam window block. I found this one quite interesting. This command enables you to block the driver's window. Okay, so when you move your head in camera 1 to the left or to the right, depending on which driver setup you have, left-hand drive or right-hand drive, the camera will stick out and act in a similar way to camera 5. So that's basically the view that when you look out the window, you look towards the back. That's camera 5. And no matter if the window is shut or not. So that's standard. Now, if you type in Gcam window block 1 and enable it, you won't be able to stick your head out through the window while it is shut anymore. Therefore, to check the rear, you will have to open the window just like in real life. So that just adds a bit of realism to the game. I thought that was a nice one to add. The next one we're going to look at is G disable beacons. So you have 3 parameters there. It's 0, 1, or 2. This parameter changes the visual glare effect on surrounding objects. And you'll only notice this during nighttime driving. So 0 is the default. 1 disables the glare and reflection of the strobes and beacons. If you're in the cab and your beacon is on, you normally see the reflection of the walls or of the vegetation, whatever. I'm talking about driving at night. Now, if you set it to 1, while you're in the cab, you won't know your beacon is on. You won't see that reflection anymore. If you jump out of the cab, you'll see that the strobe is still working, the beacon is still strobing, but it doesn't send a reflection. So it doesn't send the glare. If you put that to 2, as in 1, it also disables the blinking of the flares by switching them on all the time. So you'll have a constant beacon that's on, or it will be constantly on. It won't be blinking anymore. The next one is that emergency brake we just spoke about earlier. So enable, disable, it's 0 or 1. And this emergency brake, when used in conjunction with G, adaptive cruise control, will have the right effect. So if you don't have cruise control enabled, emergency brake won't work. If you have ACC enabled and not emergency brake, ACC will not have the desired effect. So you basically crawl up to the vehicle in front of you, especially if they're getting to a traffic light or whatever, your truck will not stop. It will slow down, but it will not stop. So emergency brake is required for this to work. On the downside of this is, if you're using emergency brake, you'll have to use an auto transmission. So you manual shift or H shift or whatever, that will not work anymore, because emergency brake literally slams the truck to a standstill. And if you're in manual mode, you won't have that pull away anymore. You'll have to literally get on the clutch and put the truck in gear again and accelerate away. So for this to work, you have to have auto transmission enabled, and you have to have ACC enabled. It's a driver preference. It's all up to you. The next one is GFPS, frames per second, 0 or 1. This shows or hides the frames per second in the mini console. So Gminicon needs to be enabled in the developer. This will show up in your game when you are driving. If your mini console is enabled and you enable frames per second, the top left corner of your screen, that will show up in red. It will be FPS and there will be a number next to it. So that will be your frames per second. If your FPS is not enabled, you'll still have, and you have your Minicon enabled, you'll still have all the details, RAM and all that, but it won't show you your frames per second. So this is just to enable the frames per second. The next one is G-Load Factor Pedestrian. This is obviously set in the config file, but if you're in game and you want to go set something in the config file quickly, you have to literally escape out of the game, save it. You'll have to open config file again, do the changes, save that, go back into the game, and then see if it's worked. This is a shortcut. So you'd enable this in the developer, you type out G-Load Factor Pedestrian, and you can select from 0 to 10. 0 disables the visibility range when you're approaching pedestrians. So if you're driving along and suddenly they come into view, and you'll see that they're slightly blocky. The detail is not very high if it's on 0. And as soon as you get closest to them, that's when the detail becomes apparent. Now, if you want to increase that detail range, you'll have to increase the number. So if you put it on 10, you're going to have maximum distance for detail, but that's going to eat up your frames. So keep that in mind, okay? So I keep it on 1 when I do use pedestrians. I keep it on 1 because it's good enough. Because they are so small in comparison to the real world around you, you won't really notice that big a difference, but some guys run 4K monitors, so you will pick it up in that instance. The next one is G Light Span Factor. The values are 0 to 4, and this gives you the visible aura of the street lamp flares at a distance. So if you're driving at night and you look at the street lamps, they give you like a glow around the globe, around the light itself. Now, the further they go, or the further away they are from you, that glow tends to diminish. Now, if you increase that value to, or you increase that value up from 0, you'll see that that aura or that glow starts to become more evident the further they are away. Okay, so that's the light span factor. Now, the G-Light Distance Factor, same applies, 0 or 4, but this is the visibility range of the street lights at night. So if you're driving along, the furthest street light away from you will become more visible, more apparent at a further distance. That's what this command does. Okay, the next one is G-Load Factor Parked. This, again, identical to the pedestrians, except that this applies to parked vehicles. So it's the detail of the visibility range when approaching. Same applies as it is in pedestrians. And the same applies to G-Load Factor Traffic. This is not the parked traffic, this is the actual moving traffic. So all AI traffic vehicles, the detail of the visibility range when approaching. Minicon is 0 is disabled, 1 is enabled. This basically just shows or hides the mini console. So that is that little block that appears when you press the tilde key. It appears down the bottom of your game screen. Okay, let's get to mirror group. This was discussed in my previous videos. If you've been following, but if you haven't, I'm just going to recap again very quickly. The values here are from 0 to 3. Actually, that's a typo. That should be 3. But disregard that. So if you type in 0, all the mirrors will be disabled. If you type in 3, all the mirrors will be displayed. Now, if you go in between, 1 and 2 do the same thing. Okay, so I like to use this range here because all the mirrors on, it does grab your frames. There's no two ways about it. Your mirror is basically a secondary screen. So if I'm running a triple screen setup, so I've got 3 monitors. If I add my mirrors to it, which is 2 on the left, 2 on the right, 1 on the windscreen and 1 on the side, on the passenger door, so that's 3, 6. That's an additional 6 screens I'm adding to my graphics card. All right, and not only that, these mirrors are additional screens being rendered in reverse. So that's additional resources being used up. So because of my multiple screens, I only use mirror group 2. So it just gives me visibility in my 2 large mirrors. Not even my blind spot mirror works. I've blacked that out. And they will display as blacked out mirrors. Only the visible ones will be the wing mirrors, the large ones. But keep in mind, if you're in game and you do change this, if you set your mirrors to 3, so you got all your mirrors displayed, and then you decide to set it to 2, the mirrors that have been disabled will not be blacked out. They will be frozen in time at the point where it was changed. So if you have a scene where you parked in the garage and your blind spot mirror has got a shot of a car parked next to you, that scene will remain throughout the game until you exit the game. So for that to be blacked out, you have to literally save the game, exit, and go back into the game. That's the only time the mirrors will be blacked out. G, income factor. This one is 0 to whatever is your pleasure. So this changes the revenue ratio, where 1 is the default, and it allows you to increase the amount of money that you will earn. All right. So basically what it takes is the value of the cargo that you are delivering, and it multiplies that by the factor that you've put in. So if your cargo is valued at 10,000 euros, if you put in a value of 2, it will give you 20,000. If you put in a value of 0, it will give you 0. Okay, so if you put in a value of 10, it's going to give you, 10,000 is going to give you 100,000. Okay, so you get the idea. The next one is mirror scale. This is the y-axis. So mirror scale y. The values are 1, 2, 3. Y-axis scale detail factor of rendered image. So 1 is 100% of the actual image in your mirror. 2 is 200%. So this is actually identical to your graphics setup in your options in-game, where you put scaling in your real world. This applies to the mirrors. So you don't have that setup, or you can't change that in your graphics setup, but you can change it in your config file. So if you want to play around with that, that's something you can look at as well. The downside to this is the more you increase it, the more your frames will be impacted. So keep that in mind. So that is for the y-axis, and this will apply to the x-axis. All right, exactly the same. Mirror view distance, we have done this before. We have gone into a lot of detail with this in my previous videos, but just to recap, this adjusts the visible render range of the large side mirrors. So 160 is the default, currently at version 145. I like to run on 100. I used to run at 1000, but yeah, I started noticing my frames and I thought it was something else, but meanwhile it was my render distance in my mirrors. So by dropping it to 100 does not take away from your visual aspect, because a lot of the time you spend looking at the road ahead. It's very minimal time you spend looking in the mirrors, so you won't really notice anything. If it bothers you, increase it, but the higher you go, the more impact it will have on your frames. So just bear that in mind. Okay, multi-mon mode. There's 2, 3, and 4. This command applies only to multi-monitor setups. Okay, so 2 would be 2 monitors, 3 will be 3 monitors, 4 will be 4 monitors. So basically 3 screens plus a dashboard screen. If you want to go 5, 6, 7, I have not tried them, but I suppose in theory it could work, because the additional number would be for the additional screens. So the first 3 are always your main screens, and then the additional numbers would be additional screens like tablets or whatever you want to add on. To get all 4 monitors recognized and appearing in the multimon config.cfg file, these are the steps you need to follow. You have to set our multimon mode to 4. and enable developer console in the config. Then you start the game. Make sure all 4 monitors are enabled in the graphics setting. You start the game, open developer console, and in there you type multimon init initialize 3 with dash, exactly like that is, okay? And then in the console type multimon save. Then you exit the game. Now all 4 monitors should appear correctly in the multimon config file, where the final tweaks can be made, and this is regarding field of view and spacing, that kind of thing. But you'll have to go in there and literally fix that up. I can't go into more details in this aspect because everyone's monitors are different. You got different aspect ratios, you got different sizes. Some guys run 19-inch, other guys run 32-inch screens. It all depends on your setup, and you have to adjust that according to your setup. All right, the next one is G Police disabled 01 is disable or enable fines. This you can adjust in your gameplay section of your options, but I've put it in there because it's an oldie, and you never know. Some guys might just not know where to look for it, so you always got this where you can use it as a shortcut. Okay, the next one is remove missing accessories 0 or 1, so enabled or disabled or enabled. It's a bit tricky to explain. Assume that you activated a tuning accessory mod and modified 1 or more trucks with the accessory provided by this mod. But in the end, you decided to deactivate the mod for some reason without selling all of the accessories. Because of that, your game crashed. So to overcome this problem, you can load your profile first, type G remove missing accessories 1, so that's enabling it, reload the save game, and then you type G remove missing accessories 0, so that's to disable it again. So it's just giving the game a chance to rectify any crashes or missing data or missing links, whatever. It's something that the game sees as corrupted data, if that makes sense. But that's basically what this does. Now, G save indicator 0 or 1, this is to show or hide the save indicator. So while you're driving along, every 5 minutes the save indicator pops up in the top left, that little circle, and says saving. If that irritates you, you can disable that. So you go, type that in, save indicator, and you type in 0. That will remove that from happening again. Okay. The next one is G set time. It's a very nice one. One thing to keep in mind is if you do change the time, you cannot go backwards in time, you can only go forwards. Okay, so this changes the current game time. So if you type in G set time space 06, you're going to jump to 6 a.m. So if you're sitting at 5 a.m., you will jump 1 hour into the future. But if you're sitting at 7 a.m. and you type in 6 a.m., you will jump ahead 23 hours. Okay, so this is a 24-hour clock. So you got 0600 and 1400. That's how that works. The next one is G set weather. If you're driving along and you don't like the inclement weather, you can just type in 0 and it will give you nice weather. If you're driving along, it's nice weather, you want some rain, type in 1 and suddenly it will be overcast and ready to rain. This is a nice one. G show game blockers 0 or 1, enabled or disabled, or vice versa. This shows or hides all the barriers from, the crosses to the arrow pointing barriers, so dead ends or roads that you cannot access, that kind of thing. The base value is 1, and in order to hide them, you have to change the value to 0. You have to keep in mind that you will still collide with them while they are invisible. Right? So just by changing this to 0, only removes the barriers, so you don't see them, but the collisions are still in place. If you want a mod that removes the barriers and the collisions, I'll put a link in the bottom where you can download. It's the actual mod that removes the collisions as well. Okay, so that you'll find in the link down below. Next one is show game elements. This shows or hides all types of floating icons you can imagine, from wait station icons to white floating delivery icons. Okay, like the command above, like game blockers, you type 0 to hide and 1 to reveal them. So this is all your gas station, your ferry icons, your tollgate icons. If you don't like them, or if you want to remove them, that's where you do it. Show game elements. The next one is simple parking doubles. Use this or to use the advanced parking option for double trailers. So enabled, disabled. If you into your advanced driving with double trailers, this is a nice one to test your skills. If you want to start the game immediately in your truck. Type in start in truck 1. This will start the game profile already in your truck. You won't be in your start menu. You won't be in your look for a job menu. Okay, so 0 is to disable and 1 is to enable. Another nice one is the R steering wheel. 0 is disabled, 1 is enabled. Because I'm in front of my wheel and seeing another wheel on my screen did bother me, so I removed the steering wheel. Now you can see the whole dash without the wheel because I've got the wheel in my hands. This is where you do it. So it removes the steering. The next one is the suspension auto reset. This disables or enables the truck suspension whether it remains raised or lowered after the 50 km/h mark. Okay, so if you did drop your truck and you pulled away and forgot to raise it, this will automatically reset your truck suspension by enabling it. The next one is G-Traffic. Everybody knows about this one. We've gone through it in a lot of detail in my previous videos. I'm not going to spend too much time on this. It basically increase, decrease AI traffic. The default is 1. Maximum is 10. So what it does is, if it's set to 1, it gives you 100% of your AI traffic allocated according to your spawn ratio and your traffic spawn.sui file. If you go to 2, it's 200%. If you go to 10, it's 1000%. Right? But that is dependent on what your mod looks like, or your traffic mod at least. The next one is go to city name. I know that the game now has a teleporting option where you can go to certain cities. The downside to that is you have to have been there before. You have to have visited that city in order to be able to teleport to that city. But with go to, there's various go to variables, but I'm going with a simple one where you type in the city name. Okay, so you type the city name to teleport to. Also using abbreviations is possible. So once you've typed in the name, you press enter, it's gonna teleport you to the city, whether you've been there or not. So you don't have to have the city visited before. And once you get there, to get back into your truck, you just press Ctrl F9 and it will place the truck at the camera's location. Remember, if you're floating up in the air still, which is where you end up teleporting to, you got to navigate down to the ground level using your numpad keys. Okay, those are your actual movement keys. But you gotta navigate to the road or to the location you want to be at before you press Ctrl F9. Okay, warp speed. Okay, this one is a very nice command, and as it says warp, it's not hyperdrive. Okay, it's not going to make your truck fly along. Well, it can, but you're not going to be able to control it. So this changes the simulation speed of the game. So 1 is 100% of the standard speed, and acceptable range would be 80% to 120%. Okay, so to type in that variable, you'd type in 0.8 or 1.2. Okay, and that would give you 120% of the actual game speed. And I've noticed that I like to play around 0.95 or 95% of the actual speed, because 100% just feels a bit too quick for me. And anything higher than that, believe me, at 120, you're going to struggle to keep the truck on the road. Those curves are going to catch you out. And if you're driving in town, you're not going to make the turns. You're going to take out the traffic lights. So be careful with that. More than that, it's just silly season. And lower than that, it feels like your game it feels like you're stuttering. The game is having serious frames issues. And then the other thing is, if you use warp, you need to enable this on every new game start. So every time you start the game, you've got to type in warp and you've got to type in your value. But I have noticed on some instances where it has remembered or it has recognized my previous save and it has maintained my warp. So just try it out. I know according to the documentation, it's not meant to save, but try it out. See if it does it for you. And a nice way to test it is to put it on 120 and close the game and start it again and see if it saves it for yourself. Some guys, I know with me, it saves. I've been reading up a lot about it. A lot of people say that it doesn't. You got to enable it every time you start the game. But just try it out, and like that, you'll know if it's working for you or not. And then save, just plain and simple save, it forces the game to save at the current time. Okay? The same applies if you just want to save the game at the point. But if you want to exit quickly, another shortcut is Alt F4. Okay, so if you press Alt and F4, it will automatically save the game and shut down the game immediately. You don't have to go through all the drama of getting out of the cab, going to the menu, clicking on exit, clicking on launchpad, or clicking on exit game, whatever. Okay. And remember, by just clicking exit and exit game, it will automatically save the game as well. And then a couple of shortcuts that are useful in the console command. If you press arrow up or arrow down, it will select the previous command that you've input. So let's say that you've played for a while and you've exited the game. When you come into the game and you want to look at those commands that you've used recently, press the tilde key, press up, and it will bring up the previous command that you used. Okay, it will remember. It doesn't matter if you played last year or not, or you haven't played for a year. It will remember the previous command that was used in the console. Okay, and it will remember all the commands. Test it. You press that arrow key up for quite a while, you'll see there are hundreds of commands that it remembers. And this is useful as you don't always want to retype, especially some of these commands that got quite long text. You don't want to sit there and retype everything. So if you scroll up and down or use the arrow up and down, you will reach that command that you've used previously. Okay, and the page up and page down is basically the scrolls the console context up and down as well. Okay, so yeah, Control plus Shift changes the mode of message display. So it changes the errors and warnings. If you want only warnings, or if you want only errors, or if you don't want any, Control Shift will adjust that. Then Shift Control plus page up or page down. This quickly or slowly scrolls the contents of the console up or down. Similar to this, except that it gives you a speed range now. And then the tab key, pressing the tab key after you open the console, you will see hints as you enter text. If you're looking for a specific command, just scroll down and it will be there. So it will give you all the available commands. And here's a good place to see all the commands that are available in the console. But like I said, a lot of them are for development and not for driver interaction. So it's up to you. If you want to get curious and investigate, that's a nice place to check it up. So we've come to the end of another video. If you liked what you saw, please join me by subscribing. And you can be one of the first to know when new content has become available. Share my channel with your friends or with someone you think could benefit from my videos. And if you have any comments or requests, drop those in the comments below and I'll be sure to respond to every one of them. I really hope you enjoyed this video, and this is Migs saying I'll catch you on the next one.